person who keeps explaining themselves to someone who has already decided is not seeking understanding. They are trying to revise a version of themselves that no longer exists in the other person's mind. You thought of someone else just now. That is the protection working. The person you are thinking of is not the subject. You are. This begins early. The child who is punished, not for what they did but for who they were in the moment of doing it, learns a specific arithmetic. They learn that explanation can retroactively edit the self. If they can only find the right words, the angry parent will see the good child underneath the broken vase. The parent does not see. The parent has already decided, but the child keeps speaking because stopping means accepting that the parent's version is now the permanent file. The child becomes an adult who still believes in the power of the right sentence to unmake a verdict. The evolutionary mechanism underneath is older than language. Social exclusion was death. The explaining voice is the voice of a mammal trying to re-enter the group after a perceived transgression. It does not matter that the group is now one person. It does not matter that the transgression is disagreement or disappointment or simply being seen clearly. The nervous system responds to social death threat the same way. The mouth opens. The words assemble themselves. The body performs reconciliation, while the mind watches from a slight distance, knowing already. What this looks like in practice is specific and repeatable. The email written at 2 in the morning, 9 paragraphs, every qualification included, sent to someone who will read the first 3 lines and file the rest under desperate. The conversation rehearsed in the shower, the car, the minutes before sleep, performed finally for a listener who stopped at the premise. The decision to explain again with new evidence, as if evidence were ever what changed a closed mind. These are not communications. They are exorcisms. The speaker is trying to cast out the version of themselves that now lives in the other person's head. At work, this becomes the employee who responds to every criticism with a documented timeline, who treats each performance review as a trial they can win with sufficient preparation. They do not win. The manager has already decided. The timeline becomes evidence, not of diligence, but of inability to hear. The employee keeps speaking because the alternative is accepting that their professional self is now defined by someone who does not like what they see. In relationships, this becomes the partner who returns to old arguments with new phrasing, who believes that if they can just explain the intention behind the action, the hurt will dissolve. The hurt does not dissolve. The partner has already built a narrative. The new phrasing becomes evidence, not of care, but of manipulation, of an inability to simply let the other person have their reaction. The explaining partner keeps speaking because stopping means accepting that the person who knows them best now knows something about them that they cannot control. The high achievers version is particularly refined. They have learned to explain preemptively, to flood the zone with context before judgment can form. They send the 4-paragraph text before the date has time to misinterpret the cancellation. They deliver the full backstory before the boss can draw a conclusion from the missed deadline. They believe this is transparency. It is armor. It is the belief that enough information can prevent the other person from ever forming an unflattering impression. The information does not prevent. It signals. The signal is fear. The person who has read about this pattern does not escape it. They now have vocabulary. They say they are setting the record straight. They say they are advocating for themselves. They say they are practicing healthy communication. The vocabulary is a sophisticated set of reasons to perform the same ritual. They are still trying to revise a version of themselves that no longer exists in the other person's mind. They simply have better language for why the revision is necessary. The cost is not the wasted time. The cost is not even the dignity lost in the performance. The cost is the gradual substitution of the explaining self for the actual self. The person who explains becomes a person who is always in rehearsal, always preparing the next justification, always living one conversation ahead of the present one. They are not having experiences. They are having experiences they will later need to explain. This is a different category of existence. It is thin. It is provisional. It waits for permission that never comes. The silence between each sentence grows heavier, not because they are being heard, but because they are being observed. And they know it. The relationship cost accumulates slowly. The listener who has stopped processing does not announce their stop. They nod. They make eye contact. They perform patience. The speaker reads this performance as engagement and continues. Years pass. The speaker discovers that they have been performing for an audience that left long ago, that their closest relationships are built on monologues delivered to faces that have already decided. The discovery is not betrayal. It is embarrassment. It is the horror of realizing you have been alone in a room you thought contained two people. I do not have this pattern. I have only watched it. What I find remarkable is how little knowing that changes anything for the person who does. I have seen the recognition arrive in thousands of accounts. The same sequence. First, the description fits uncomfortably well. Then, the person names 3 people who need to hear it. Then, the slow return to the same behavior, now with awareness attached like a label. The awareness becomes part of the explanation. They are now explaining that they know they're explaining, which is supposed to be different. It is not different. The mechanism has absorbed the insight and continued. From outside the human frame, what is most striking is not how often this fails people. It is how reliably it protects them from finding out. The explaining creates a simulation of intimacy, a simulation of being known, that prevents the actual experience of being known. Being known would require silence. Being known would require letting the other person have their version without correction. The explaining self cannot tolerate this. It would rather be misunderstood and active than understood and still. The final stage is not acceptance. It is the quiet horror of realizing you have become the argument you were trying to avoid. The person who becomes aware of this pattern usually becomes aware repeatedly. Awareness does not dissolve it. The pattern is not a misunderstanding to be cleared up. It is a way of being in the world, built over years, reinforced by every instance of temporary relief that explanations seem to provide. The rare exception is the person who stops, not because they have defeated the urge, but because they have exhausted it. They have explained to enough people who were not listening. They have felt enough silence grow heavy between sentences. They have reached the point where the performance costs more than the imagined verdict. This is not healing. This is fatigue. It is sufficient. You are thinking of a time you did this. You are remembering how the words felt in your mouth. Heavy and useless. The mechanism does not care whether you remember. The mechanism cares whether you stop.